From Studio 3B in Rockefeller Center, here is Stone Phillips.
Good evening. Remember when we first showed you this? A new safety test done on some of America's most popular cars to see how they hold up, not in a straight head-on collision, but in the kind you're more likely to have, where impact occurs just off-center. Tonight, another report on a vehicle that's become extremely popular, especially with young families. If you don't drive one, your kids have probably carpooled in one. It has a reputation for safety, but there's something you should know. Here's Lee Thompson with a Dateline investigation.
You see them everywhere. Minivans have become the family vehicle of choice. And Chrysler minivans are among the most popular. More than 5 million Dodge and Plymouth vans have been sold to families like the Bairds of Northern Virginia.
We bought it because we had a family of 3 children and we were going to take some vacations, and my children played soccer. We did a lot of traveling.
Was safety a consideration?
Definitely, yeah. It was a big factor.
In fact, Chrysler aggressively sells safety and claims to make the safest minivan on the road.
Plymouth Voyager, dual airbags, reclining integrated child safety seats, the safest minivan in the world.
Yeah, we assumed it was safe, which I think a lot of people do.
But on September 18th, 1992, something happened that changed her mind and her life forever.
It was a Friday, and actually he'd called me twice that day. He was on his way home. I think it was about 4:30 in the afternoon.
George Baird, 49-year-old computer specialist, husband and father of 3, was driving home in the family's 1987 Plymouth Voyager minivan.
They said that traffic had stopped on the exit going down 95. And evidently the truck behind him didn't stop and hit the back of my husband's car.
The man who hit Baird's van says that on impact, it seemed as if George Baird just disappeared from behind the wheel. Disappeared, Alan Baird says, because his seat collapsed.
At that point, he lost control of the car because the seat fell backwards. He was basically in the back seat, and then that's when his car went across and was hit by a tractor trailer.
He didn't have a chance.
No.
This is the damage to George Baird's Chrysler minivan when he was hit from the rear at 27 miles an hour. But it's the damage inside the van that is critical. Engineering experts say that the force of this rear ender caused the track where the seat goes back and forth to peel apart, throwing the seat backward. George Baird was apparently forced flat on his back, slipped out of his seatbelt, and his head landed against the back seat. Police say George Baird's van crossed 2 lanes of traffic before it was hit by an 18-ton trailer truck going about 50 miles an hour. It hit here, just where Baird's head was at ground zero.
It was just awful.
Cynthia is George Baird's daughter.
How is someone supposed to control a car when you're in the back seat? You can't reach the pedals. There's no way you can reach the steering wheel. There's nothing you can do. You're helpless.
This is not a problem that you can sweep under the rug. It's not a trivial problem.
Ken Sachelski is an auto safety engineer and a former member of the government's Motor Vehicle Safety Council. He's an expert who is paid to testify in seatback cases. He testified for the Bairds in their suit against Chrysler. Chrysler says Baird's death was a tragic accident, but says it was caused by an unalert motorist. The company settled the Baird's case for $2 million without admitting fault.
I need the pivot point on this side, too.
Sachelski has tested close to 100 vehicle seat systems. His opinion of the Chrysler minivan seats?
I know that this is one of the weaker seat systems of the vans that are on the road that I've tested.
Chrysler says, well, of course he's going to criticize our seats because he makes a lot of money testifying against us in court trials.
I do make money testifying, but the bottom line is if my recommendation is made and the seats become safer, then I'm out of a job, and that's what I would rather see.
What Sachelski recommends is strengthening seat backs and seat tracks. The fact is, in a rear-end collision, you're thrown backwards and your seat is supposed to restrain you like your seatbelt and airbag protects you in the front. Sachelski says George Baird's seat was not strong enough to restrain him because of how it was designed. Baird's seat was mounted on metal seat tracks and held upright by a piece of steel resembling a hockey stick on one side and by a pivot bolt on the other. Sachelski's testing shows in a rear-end crash, most of the stress goes to the hockey stick side of the seat, forcing most of the pressure onto the seat track. And even if the seat back holds,
the tracks peel apart and still allow you to get dumped into the rear area of the vehicle.
That's what he says happened to George Baird. And Sachelski says untold thousands of similarly weak Chrysler minivan seats are still on the road.
I mean, there's something that we know that could save other people.
Sachelski says he knows even more. Weak seats are not just a danger to Chrysler minivan owners.
Most seats are fairly weak.
Is there a minivan on the market today that has what you would call a safe seat?
I would say no. They're just not strong enough to hold you up in a foreseeable rear impact.
All three U.S. automakers have been sued for alleged seatback failures in both minivans and cars. The automakers have won some, lost some, and settled some out of court. Sachelski consulted for the families involved in these two minivan cases. 5-year-old Blake Zern was seriously injured when a drunk driver slammed into the back of his family's Ford Aerostar van at about 40 miles an hour. This graphic animation, introduced at trial, shows how his lawyers believe the father's seat collapsed backwards onto the boy. His leg was broken, his skull was fractured, and he suffered partial loss of vision in one eye. The jury decided the drunk driver was mostly to blame, but determined Ford was also partially responsible for sale of a defective and unreasonably dangerous product. Ford is appealing and maintains that the boy's head injuries were not caused by the front seat. And there's this case. The passenger riding in this Chevy Astro van was killed and the driver seriously injured when they were rear-ended. The police report says the driver and the front seat passenger were propelled into the rear of the van as the seatbacks collapsed. GM settled this case out of court without admitting fault.
By now, you might be wondering, if this is such a big problem, why don't you know more about it? The answer is simple. The seatback problem has been overshadowed by larger safety issues like how to protect people in a front or side collision.